Shedeur Sanders, Browns insider leak, NFL drama, coaching scandal, Cleveland Browns, secret agenda, player controversy, locker room tension, viral NFL story, sports backlash, coach prime drama, NFL outrage, breaking football news, front office leak, NFL buzz. Something finally slipped in Cleveland, something the Browns never expected to reach the public. After months of denials, mixed messaging, and carefully scripted answers, insiders are now quietly admitting that a secret agenda may have been operating behind the scenes. And the target was none other than Shedeur Sanders. For a fan base that spent the entire season fighting over who should have been under center, this revelation wasn't just surprising, it blew the entire conversation wide open. Because think about it, from the very beginning, nothing about the Browns' quarterback decisions made sense. In this deep dive, we're breaking down exactly what insiders are finally admitting, the clues they left behind, the contradictions that never added up, and the agenda that fans suspected long before anyone had the courage to say it out loud. The first cracks in the Browns' story didn't show up in headlines or press conferences. They appeared quietly, almost accidentally, inside those early QB tracker reports from June and July. And if you were paying attention, those numbers revealed something the public wasn't supposed to see. While the narrative pushed by coaches and media made it seem like Shedeur Sanders was a long-term project who needed months of development, the hard data showed the exact opposite. Day after day, rep after rep, Shedeur was outplaying every quarterback in the building. Completion percentage, higher. Decision-making, cleaner. Poise during team drills, noticeably better. Even local reporters admitted, though only briefly, that he looked shockingly polished for a rookie stepping into an NFL system. Yet somehow, none of this glowing feedback ever made its way into the mainstream storyline. Instead, the spotlight stayed glued to veterans like Joe Flacco or Deshaun Watson, and the messaging remained suspiciously consistent. Shedeur needs time. He's not ready. We're bringing him along slowly. But if that were true, why did the numbers say he was leading the QB room? This is when confusion among fans turned into suspicion, because the disconnect was too large to ignore. How could a rookie outperform every other quarterback in camp and still drop lower on the depth chart? How could he demonstrate better accuracy than Flacco, stronger command than Gabriel, and cleaner reads than Pickett, yet be treated like an afterthought? None of it added up. And the moment supporters began questioning these contradictions, they were immediately hit with pushback from Browns media. Don't overreact to camp stats. He's just a rookie. You fans don't understand the complexity of the system. Except, the insiders did understand. And those same insiders are now admitting something fans suspected all along. The truth was in the numbers, but the organization didn't want the numbers to shape the narrative. So the question became bigger than performance. It wasn't about who played well. It was about who was allowed to look like they played well. The filters, the framing, the selective reporting, they all pointed to one thing. Someone was trying to control the storyline long before the season ever started. But if the QB tracker exposed the first crack in the facade, the next wave of contradictions would blow it wide open. Once the QB tracker numbers started circulating, something strange happened. Something that didn't match how a professional organization usually responds to a standout rookie. Instead of celebrating Shedeur's early success, certain local reporters and insiders seemed almost determined to downplay it. They brushed it off, redirected conversations, or focused on tiny mistakes instead of the overwhelmingly positive trends. It wasn't just skepticism. It felt like a coordinated effort to steer the public away from what the numbers were screaming. Shedeur looked like the best quarterback on the roster. But then a new layer appeared, one that made everything even more suspicious. Reporters who once mocked fans for believing in Shedeur's ability months later, that there were agendas inside the Browns organization. Let that sink in. These weren't random tweets or fan theories. These were insiders, people with access, acknowledging that the narrative around Shedeur had been influenced, shaped, or possibly manipulated from the inside. And what made it even crazier was how quickly the tone shifted. The same voices who insisted Shedeur was nowhere near ready started walking back their statements. The same analysts who once defended the coaching decisions now admitted things weren't adding up. And the same media figures who dismissed fans as delusional quietly changed their tune once Shedeur started proving on the field what the camp numbers already showed. Rumors suggest some reporters were fed selective information to justify keeping Shedeur. Others claim certain insiders didn't want to be wrong after publicly supporting different quarterbacks. And some commentary even hinted that parts of the organization wanted to avoid a quarterback controversy altogether, even if that meant hiding the truth. But here's where everything snapped into focus. If Shedeur wasn't ready, why would insiders admit there were agendas? If he needed time, why were the QB tracker numbers suppressed? If the veterans were truly better options, why were their performances so much worse on paper? This wasn't a simple case of media misjudgment. It was a tug-of-war between what was happening on the field and what was being presented to the public. A battle between truth and narrative. And as these contradictions piled up, fans began asking a dangerous question, one the Browns never wanted to address. As the season unfolded, one pattern became impossible to ignore. Every roadblock Shedeur faced seemed to trace back to the same place, Kevin Stefanski's office. While the organization insisted their decisions were based on readiness, scheme fit, and long-term plans, insiders began hinting at something far more personal. According to multiple local voices, Stefanski simply did not want Shedeur to be the guy. Reports claim it took him nearly 2 months just to say Shedeur's name publicly, even while other rookies and veterans were routinely praised in pressers. That silence didn't feel accidental. It felt intentional. And fans noticed. Media noticed. Even opposing analysts noticed. When a coach refuses to acknowledge the rookie outperforming the room, it raises a bigger question. Why pretend he isn't there? Others claim he wanted to roll with his preferred style of quarterback. Safer, less explosive, easier to control within a rigid system. And some insiders even hinted that Stefanski didn't appreciate Shedeur's confidence, interpreting it as defiance rather than leadership. These claims remain unverified, but they spread quickly because they fit the observable pattern. Think about it. If Shedeur was truly fourth string, why did his numbers say otherwise? If the staff believed in competition, why was the top performer consistently overlooked? If the plan was to develop him, why act annoyed whenever his name came up? The resistance didn't stop at silence either. Reports circulated that Stefanski wanted to start Dillon Gabriel first, even though Gabriel's preseason performance was significantly weaker. Pickett and Flacco also got looks before Shedeur, despite offering far less upside. And when insiders later revealed agendas were present, fans started connecting dots they weren't supposed to connect. To them, it looked like Stefanski was trying to protect his system, his veterans, and perhaps even his pride, not the team's best chance to win. But while Stefanski appeared hesitant, ownership painted a completely different picture. Publicly, Jimmy Haslam embraced the Sanders family. Privately, the decisions didn't match the energy on camera. And that contradiction created the biggest red flag of all. If Kevin Stefanski's hesitance created confusion, Jimmy Haslam's behavior turned that confusion into a full-blown mystery. On camera, the Browns owner projected warmth, enthusiasm, and even admiration toward Coach Prime and the Sanders family. Clips of Haslam greeting them with open arms circulated online, smiling, shaking hands, offering support, saying all the right things that suggested Shedeur would be treated like a valued investment. But the organization's actions behind the scenes didn't match that energy at all. Haslam publicly stated the team needed to see the rookies in real game situations. That's a clear directive, one that implies opportunity, evaluation, and genuine interest in development. So if that's the case, here's the question everyone keeps asking. Why was Dillon Gabriel given the first chance instead of Shedeur? Gabriel didn't outperform Shedeur in camp. He didn't look sharper in preseason. He didn't generate more confidence from fans or insiders. Yet somehow, he got the nod first. And even more puzzling, Shedeur was buried at fourth string, treated like an afterthought rather than one of the franchise's most intriguing rookies. The contradiction only deepened when insiders began whispering that Shedeur was not putting in the work early on. But even the reporters repeating that rumor added a crucial detail. Shedeur had already been told he was being redshirted. If a player is told he isn't even in the running, how engaged is he supposed to act? And why would the Browns invest a draft pick just to sideline him before competition even began? The deeper you dig, the more the pieces refuse to fit. If Haslam truly wanted rookies evaluated, why structure the depth chart to keep your most promising one from competing? If the owner supported Coach Prime, why would the coaching staff not align with that mindset? And if internal politics weren't at play, why were reporters? This disconnect between ownership's words and the staff's actions made fans suspect something structural, not situational. A tension between the faces of the franchise and the people running day-to-day operations. And whenever tension exists at the top, decisions rarely reflect what's best for the field. But this contradiction wasn't the biggest red flag. It was merely the doorway to a much bigger theory. A theory insiders danced around, but never fully said out loud. At least not until now. By the time multiple insiders began acknowledging the word agenda, fans felt something they hadn't felt all season: validation. For months, supporters insisting something strange was happening inside the Browns building were painted as emotional, biased, or everything snapped into focus. Suddenly, all the small contradictions, the confusing depth chart decisions, the clipped praise, and the selective reporting didn't look random anymore. They looked coordinated. Rumors suggest the agenda had multiple layers. One theory claims the staff wanted to avoid a quarterback controversy by propping up veterans, Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, so the locker room would stay stable. Another suggests Shedeur's rise disrupted pre-planned strategies, like tanking for higher 2026 draft positioning. And some insiders even hinted the coaching staff wasn't aligned with ownership about how soon Shedeur should see the field. These claims remain unverified, but the way insiders danced around them made fans question whether they were really that far-fetched. Think about what we saw. The QB tracker backed it up in black and white, yet he was buried at fourth string and framed as not ready. Meanwhile, veterans with worse performances were elevated above him. If these decisions weren't about football, then what were they about? Reports claim certain media members were fed selective information, just enough to create doubt about Shedeur's readiness. Statements like, "He needs more time," or "The staff isn't impressed yet," popped up again and again, despite conflicting data from actual practices. And when journalists later admitted agendas existed, it became clear those statements weren't entirely neutral. Even the narrative that Shedeur wasn't putting in the work early on seemed suspiciously timed. Insiders speculated that once the staff told him he was being redshirted, his engagement naturally fluctuated. But rather than explain, some used it to justify burying him. Convenient, if nothing else. What made fans believe the agenda theory even stronger was what happened next. The moment Shedeur was forced onto the field, he immediately delivered at a level that invalidated months of negative framing. Suddenly, the same insiders who doubted him were praising him. The same reporters who questioned his ability flipped their tone. It was the clearest evidence yet that the narrative had never matched the talent. But Shedeur's performance didn't just expose the agenda. It exposed something even deeper about how the Browns operated. When Shedeur finally stepped onto the field, all the theories, rumors, and insider whispers were instantly put to the test. This was the moment the Browns had been trying to control. The moment some reporters seemed hesitant to acknowledge, and the moment certain coaches may have hoped wouldn't arrive so soon. But once it did, everything the organization tried to shape behind the scenes unraveled in real time. Because the second Shedeur started playing, the excuses stopped making sense. The rookie who was supposedly not ready looked calmer than the veterans. The quarterback, who was fourth-string material, made faster reads than the starters. The player rumored to have engagement issues commanded the offense like he'd been running it for years. It wasn't just a good performance. It was a public contradiction of everything fans had been told about him. The gap between the narrative and the reality didn't just shrink, it exploded. The plays spoke louder than any insider quote. The stats overshadowed every preseason rumor. And suddenly, the people who pushed the idea that Shedeur needed to be eased in were scrambling to rewrite their own scripts. Within hours, the tone across Cleveland media shifted. Analysts who once insisted he wasn't ready began praising his poise. Reporters who questioned his accuracy started highlighting his mechanics. Voices that told fans they were overreacting now sounded uncertain, even cautious. Then came the most revealing moment of all. Insiders openly admitting that agendas had influenced how Shedeur was covered. That wasn't a small confession. It was a crack in the organization's armor. It meant the narrative wasn't driven by performance. It wasn't driven by data. It wasn't even driven by competition. It was shaped by people inside the building who didn't want Shedeur to have the opportunity to prove himself too soon. But once he did, there was no going back. The truth was out there for everyone to see, and it was undeniable. The fans were right. The numbers were right. The narrative was wrong. And now with the truth exposed, the Browns face a much bigger question, one that stretches far beyond Shedeur Sanders. If the organization could misjudge this so badly, what else might be happening behind closed doors? Because once a team is caught shaping a false narrative, trust becomes the next thing on the line. Once the truth finally broke through the noise, something shifted, not just around Shedeur Sanders, but around the entire Cleveland Browns organization. Fans weren't just celebrating Shedeur's success, they were demanding answers. Because when a rookie instantly disproves months of negative messaging, it forces a deeper question. How much of what fans were told was ever real? For Shedeur, this moment does more than vindicate him. It redefines his trajectory. He went from being framed as a quiet developmental project to becoming the quarterback who exposed an entire internal narrative. That's not just a storyline. That's leverage. That's respect. That's a shift in power the organization can't ignore anymore. Whether the coaching staff wanted him or not, whether certain insiders believed in him or not, Shedeur proved the one thing no agenda could hide. He can play, and he can win. But for the Browns, the implications cut much deeper. Trust between a franchise and its fans is fragile. Once supporters realize they weren't given the full truth, the relationship changes. Fans start questioning everything: depth chart decisions, media messaging, coaching motives, even organizational direction. When insiders admit agendas existed, it invites more speculation. Were they protecting veterans? Were they trying to avoid controversy? Were certain coaches clinging to their own evaluations? Or was the goal something bigger, like setting the stage for future draft plans? None of these theories are proven, but the fact that they even sound plausible shows how much the narrative has fractured. And here's where things get even more complicated for Cleveland. Shedeur's rise forces the organization to confront every bad call they made, every ignored statistic, every downplayed report, every narrative that now looks suspiciously strategic. Because Shedeur didn't just challenge the depth chart, he challenged the credibility of the decision-makers. Yet at the same time, his emergence gives the Browns something they desperately needed. Hope, a quarterback who can stabilize the franchise, a fresh start, a new chapter built on performance rather than politics. And if the Browns are smart, they'll embrace that shift instead of resisting it. Because whether they planned it or not, Shedeur Sanders just exposed the old system and became the future they can't afford to hide anymore. When you zoom out and look at the entire arc of this story, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The truth didn't emerge because someone finally decided to tell it. It emerged because Shedeur Sanders forced it into the light. Every agenda, every misleading narrative, every attempt to downplay his talent collapsed the moment he stepped onto the field and played like the quarterback fans always believed he could be. And that's the part the Browns never planned for. Narratives can be managed. Perceptions can be shaped. But performance? That's the one thing no agenda can control. The second Shedeur started throwing NFL passes, the story the organization tried to sell simply couldn't survive anymore. The most striking thing is how quickly everything unraveled. First, the QB tracker numbers, ignored for months, suddenly went viral as fans revisited them with a new understanding. Then, insiders who once defended the staff began whispering about agendas, uncertainty, and internal tension. And soon after, reporters openly admitted what fans suspected all along. Decisions inside the building weren't just about football. But here's the twist. The very thing Cleveland tried to hide might end up saving them. Because with Shedeur's talent now undeniable, the Browns have a quarterback who commands the moment and who proved in one game that he belongs exactly where fans said he did. Still, the fallout is real. The trust between fans, media, and the organization has been damaged. Supporters will remember how Shedeur was framed before he ever got a genuine opportunity. They'll remember how quickly insiders dismissed them. They'll remember the excuses, the contradictions, and the quiet agendas that nearly robbed the team of its best option. But they'll also remember the night everything changed, the night the rookie silenced the room, the night the agenda collapsed, the night narrative finally bowed to reality. Because no matter how carefully a team tries to shape perception, no matter who attempts to control the story, the truth always finds a way out. Especially when the truth can throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And now the Browns face a new question, one they can't script or spin. Will they embrace the quarterback they tried to hide, or repeat the mistakes that got them exposed in the first place?